Well, hey there. My name is Sunny Brigham. I'm one of the mentors here at the Nutrition and Herbal Collective. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the methylation cycle. So often we come on here and we talk about ways to build your business or things that you might consider in your practice. But as we inch a little bit closer to the CNS exam in June, I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that you might want to study for the exam. And so today we're going to talk about the methylation cycle. I have a presentation, so let me share that very quickly. Let me just get it in presentation mode. And I'll share my screen. There she is. Okay, so the methylation cycle, and really we're just going to talk about some of the basics. I mean, we could talk about the methylation cycle for hours. So I don't want to keep everybody, on here too long. So we're just going to dive into a little bit of the basics, some things to consider, some symptoms of under or over methylation, and what's the overall importance of the methylation cycle. Okay, so let me move my video because I can't see. There we go. Okay, so what is the methylation cycle? It's essentially one of our many cycles or processes that regulate so many different functions in the body. And I have a couple of really important ones listed here, but that's only like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the methylation cycle. So it helps with mood regulation. If you've ever worked with anybody or what you learned in school about methylation is we know that increased anxiety can be a symptom of methylation issues or increased mood disorders. And that's because the methylation cycle can help regulate neurotransmitter function, which is going to affect our serotonin, our dopamine, and our GABA, which is going to regulate whether we're upset, sad, a little depressed, a little anxious, maybe a little OCD or very on edge, have ruminating thoughts. It also goes into DNA synthesis, so making new cells and gene expression. So the methylation cycle has been linked to expression of certain diseases. So if you have genetic alterations or genetic lineage for the development of certain diseases or one of your clients, if you are not fully supporting the methylation cycle, then that could cause some of those genetic alterations to express, leading to certain disease development or progression. It plays a role in the liver detoxification process, which is very important, and energy production. So fatigue is one of the really common symptoms of poor methylation or low methylation cycle production. The methylation cycle uses methyl donors and it uses methyl groups to function appropriately. We do have some cofactors as well that go in there to kind of keep the cycle running. And we're going to talk about these here in a minute. Okay, so a methyl donor is basically a nutrient or a cofactor that's going to donate a methyl group to another structure. So it's taking a methyl group from one cycle or process in the body and utilizing it for another cycle or process in the body. A methyl group is one of the most common chemical structures in the body. It's 3 hydrogen atoms with 1 carbon atom. If you go all the way back to your organic chemistry class or organic chemistry days, you may or may not remember that. And methyl donors help to provide methyl groups to ensure that your methylation cycle runs appropriately. And we're going to talk here in just a second about what goes into methyl donors. So these are your methyl donors, folate or a B9. I think most people are very well aware of this when it comes to the MTHFR genetic alteration or methylation in general. Folate seems to be the one that everybody talks about, is we've got to get activated folate in your body so that we can make sure that your methylation is working properly. But as you can see here, it's much deeper than just folate. So folate, which you can find obviously in your dark leafy greens, your legumes, your sunflower seeds, fruit, whole grains, liver, and seafood. B12 is also very important. You can find that obviously in your animal products, fortified foods, and nutritional yeast. And so we typically know that vegans and vegetarians can be low in B12 just from a dietary standpoint. Methionine, which you also found, or which can be found in some animal products. It's also in soy and Brazil nuts, some white beans, and quinoa. Zinc, meat, shellfish, legumes, seeds, nuts, dairy, eggs, and whole grains. But we use zinc for a lot of different things in the body. So even though we might be getting a lot of really good nutrients or a good amount of these foods in our diet, we might not be getting enough zinc to support the system overall, just because of the number of enzymatic reactions that zinc is involved in. Plus, we typically use it very fast when we're stressed, and a lot of the clients that you run across in your practice are going to be pretty stressed. So zinc is always something to keep in the back of your mind, is something to support that methylation cycle as well. Betaine, so that comes from beets, broccolis, greens, shellfish, and spinach. So a lot of, you can see with beets, broccoli, and spinach, we've got some bitter foods in there. And choline, eggs, organ meat, caviar fish, shiitake mushrooms, soy beef, chicken, wheat, and cruciferous vegetables. Choline is really, really important to the liver. And so this is something that you want to make sure that you're supporting adequately as well, excuse me, in your vegan or vegetarian clients. And then there are some, which we will talk about much, much further down the line. There are some genetic alterations for choline metabolism and creation in the body. So some people have to what's the word I'm looking for? They have to be very on point about getting their choline in either through eggs or through cruciferous vegetables. And sometimes they might even need to supplement a little bit. So these are your methylation cofactors. So these are kind of outside the donors, right? So we've got your donors here, and then we've got your cofactors. And then you're going to see a little bit of crossover in the cofactors because B vitamins, which are also here, you've got folate and B12, and zinc is a donor, but it's also a cofactor, and so is choline as well. So your cofactors are things that go in along with those donors to kind of help move the cycle along. And so here is kind of an overview of a good portion of the methylation cycle. But some of your cofactors, like I said here, also act as methyl donors. You've got your B vitamins. So we've got folate and B12 as methyl donors, but for cofactors, we've got B2 and B6. So oftentimes a really good solid B complex or supporting nutrition through foods that are really high in B vitamins can be very helpful. Choline, which we already talked about, trimethylglycine, also known as TMG, or its precursor, which is glycine. So sometimes people might need a little support by supplementing with glycine. They may also get some glycine through food as well. Lithium, zinc, and magnesium. Magnesium is always a supplement that is on the mind of a lot of clinicians, because that with zinc and some B vitamins is typically something we supplement pretty frequently. So yes, these are your cofactors along with your donors is what keeps that methylation cycle running very smoothly. And then there are some SNPs, or some basically alterations to the DNA and how the body functions. And so common SNPs that I think most clinicians or most of you have learned in school about the MTHFR mutation. So common SNPs for that are 677T and 1298C. But there are a ton of other SNPs that go into the MTHFR cycle that are not, or in the methylation cycle, that are not just those two SNPs. Those are the most talked about. Those are the most common ones, but there are so many others. I talked about a genetic issue for choline that would affect your methylation cycle if you have a genetic alteration, choline metabolism. Now, that's not something that we talk about with MTHFR because it's not an MTHFR specific SNP, but it will affect your methylation cycle. So when you think methylation or the methylation cycle, don't stick to just the 677T and the 1298C, which are the most common MTHFR mutations. There are so many others that also affect the methylation cycle and how it processes for us. Over 50% of the population has one or more altered SNP for the methylation cycle. Often people have many. For me personally, I have a ton. I have a lot. They basically reduce the availability and usability of the MTHFR enzyme. And so that's specifically these two right here. So these two reduce the availability and the usability of the MTHFR enzyme, which is, as we learned in school, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, which is a fun word to say. Basically, the MTHFR enzyme converts folate into the active folate, so 5-MTHF, and it also converts homocysteine into methionine. So those are the big roles of the MTHFR enzyme. But if we look back here at the cycle, you can see that there's so much more to the methylation cycle than just methionine and folate and B12, right? Folate does play a role, but we've got B6, we've got cystathionine, cysteine, which are byproducts of the cycle. Here's your methyltransferase, your S-adenosyl homocysteine, S-adenosyl methionine. So there's a lot that goes into the methylation cycle that's outside of these two SNPs. So don't limit your education and don't limit your thought process on the methylation cycle to these two SNPs. It's much bigger than that. Okay, so what are some symptoms of poor methylation? And we're going to see a lot of these in practice. You're also going to see a lot of these with other issues or conditions as well. So if we talk about the first one, so fatigue despite healthy sleep habits. That happens in a lot of people. That can happen with somebody that has an autoimmune condition that doesn't necessarily affect the methylation cycle. That could happen with somebody that just has not a really great overall diet. Maybe they're low nutrient status, or they've got increased intestinal permeability and they're consuming foods that their body doesn't like. That's going to increase fatigue too, even though they might be sleeping really well at night. So just because it's fatigue doesn't mean it's methylation, but it could also be methylation. Red face after exercise. And when I say red face after exercise, I'm talking like a really strong red face, because that would be a histamine response. So we can release histamine when we're exercising, and methylation, the methylation cycle helps to break down excess histamines. So if we're consistently having a really red face, now I'm not talking like a little red because obviously you just worked out, but like somebody that has like a very red face, or maybe they get a migraine after working out or a really big runny nose, those are histamine kind of really symptoms of elevated histamine after working out. So those are indications to look for as well. Needing an energy boost through sugar and caffeine, having too much estrogen, or basically just not clearing enough estrogen through their liver detoxification process, because the methylation cycle goes into the liver detoxification process as well. Troubles falling asleep due to an active mind or racing thoughts. So stress can impact that as well. But if you have somebody that manages their stress pretty well, but as soon as they hit their pillow at night, their mind just kind of turns on and they're thinking all the things that they shouldn't be thinking. Feeling heavily stressed consistently throughout the day, that is going to tax your methylation cycle again, because it's affecting neurotransmitter function, but it's also utilizing, so stress is going to utilize a lot of those nutrients that we actually need to run the methylation cycle. So if we're utilizing them for adrenal function or through hormone production of epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol, we're not really having enough left over for the methylation cycle, especially if we don't have a very good, solid, broad diet. Increased symptoms of anxiety, depression, and OCD. Again, we talked about those neurotransmitter functions and how methylation impacts that. Digestive issues, frequent headaches, perfectionism, and seasonal allergies. And so the frequent headaches and seasonal allergies can go into not clearing enough histamine from the body. Digestive issues can come from stress, and then perfectionism. I'd like to say that this is genetic, but it's probably not. It kind of goes along with the OCD. Somebody that I have OCD, and I know I have OCD from not a really great methylation cycle, and I can tell when it comes out more and when it's not as strong of an issue. So I know that when I get very obsessive about certain things, or when I'm feeling like I'm in a perfectionist run, I know that I need to support my methylation cycle a little bit more than I am. There are tests for methylation activity. Homocysteine is one of the easiest ones you can do because a client can just go to their physician and ask for a homocysteine test. It's generally covered by insurance. And what homocysteine is going to do is it's going to look at the overall function of your methylation cycle. So if homocysteine is high, then we are not running the methylation cycle as well. And so we need to support it. The downside to this is it's not really going to tell us exactly what section of the methylation cycle we need to support, but it is a good indicator of how well the methylation cycle is running. Genova Diagnostics has a very specific methylation panel, which will, it's obviously a very pricey test, but it will tell us exactly what spot of the methylation cycle is not functioning very well. Doctor's Data has a DNA methylation test, which you can look at all of the different SNPs that could potentially affect the methylation cycle. And then if you ever have a client that has raw data for, or has ever done something like 23andMe or MyHeritage DNA or Ancestry DNA or any of the other, cheek swabs or spit in the tube, send it in and you get your lineage, you can typically look at the raw data or export the raw data and start looking at different SNPs there. And again, if you do that, you don't want to contain it to the 677T or the 1298C. You want to look at everything that could potentially impact the methylation cycle. And there are some online programs that you can run that raw data through. These aren't things that you need to memorize. Homocysteine is probably the one that is most commonly talked about. So that one is one that you're probably going to want to know. But aside from that, these are just for GWIZ when you come across a client that you suspect has some pretty severe methylation issues. And then over versus under methylator. So this is kind of how we classify people. Over methylation, basically you're supporting the methylation too much. And when you do that, it's going to create a new set of symptoms because you can cause somebody to be an overmethylator. And then undermethylation is still needing to support the methylation cycle. Maybe you're supporting it, but you're just not providing enough support to it in your client. So symptoms of overmethylation would be ruminations or trouble, shutting your mind off, but this can also be a symptom of undermethylation as well. A high pain threshold, feeling low motivated, adverse reactions to SSRIs, paranoia, depression, high anxiety, having some tension, upper back, neck, and shoulders. So somebody that kind of walks around like this all day, they're just holding everything in, and some food sensitivities. Like I mentioned, these could potentially be symptoms of undermethylation as well. So it's important that if you aren't sure, test, and test again. Okay, so that's just kind of the basics of the methylation cycle. I wanted to talk to you about, so inside our program at the Nutrition and Herbal Collective, inside the mentorship program, all of our interns in the program get access to the CNS prep course. The CNS prep course basically is a 3-month self-paced course designed to help you study and help you pass the CNS exam. You get all your study materials, some video and written support as well. There are 4 practice exams kind of spread throughout. We also have 4 live study sessions. So we host live study sessions, 4 of them, as we head into each exam. So in June, we're going to start study sessions in May. Yes, May. I had to work backwards and count my months. You'll also have access to the Nutrition and Herbal Collective Facebook group, and then we do weekly study tips and some kind of quick quizzes inside the Facebook group to get you thinking about things as you study and head into that exam. We also encourage study groups. We encourage the formation of study groups with those that are also doing the CNS prep course. If you are not a member of our mentorship program and you would like to be, definitely schedule a strategy call with one of us. You can schedule a strategy call at nutritionherbalcollective.com. As a member of the mentorship, you do get the CNS prep course for free. But if you are not a member of our mentorship and you are taking the CNS exam and you would like more direction on how to study or what you should be studying for, you need to review organic chemistry and more in depth of methylation and you want to go over case studies and you want charts for all of the nutrients and drug nutrient interactions and herb nutrient interactions. So lots of study materials to kind of make your life a little bit easier as we go into the exam. You can get access to everything for $197 and you can register on our website at nutritionherbalcollective.com. Okay, so let me stop sharing. And just let me make sure that we don't have any questions here about the methylation cycle. Let me see. I am not seeing any questions. If you are watching this after the fact and you do have questions that pop up, definitely post your questions in the comments below. And then I will come back, or one of us will come back and make sure that we get your questions answered for you. I'm just pulling this up on another web browser just so I can make sure that there are no questions, because sometimes I can't see them in the live view. Let's see. Nope, no questions. Okay, perfect. All right, so thanks for joining me today on an overview of the methylation cycle, and I'll see you around. Bye.